Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. In today's video, I'm going to be going over some basic steps of polymer clay and how to attach jewelry findings. I have tasked my high school students with a commodity project. They're going to be making a series of sellable goods. If you're interested in making jewelry or charms, then stick around. I have a couple tips for you on working with polymer clay before we get into the finding attachments. When you're working with polymer clay, you will need rolling pin. If you don't have a rolling pin, an alternative to that to use a water bottle. Refillable water bottle, you want to make sure it's a pretty hefty bottle. You don't want to use anything that has an aerosol can. It's under a lot of pressure. You don't want that pressure to be an issue. If the can pop, it could be a nightmare. You can find many different things for textures and patterns. I have just an old lid. You just roll this into the clay. I have a plastic knife, and in the handle of this plastic knife, there's some really great texture in there. So if I squish a little bit of clay into there, I can pull up some texture. This Yogurtland spoon has a really cool flip-flops and sunglasses. You can use just about anything to find texture, make it a little bit more interesting. It doesn't have to be very complicated. If you are going to be using plastic items, the polymer clay can get a little bit sticky. Any kind of cooking spray, and you just hit your piece with a bit of cooking spray before you roll your polymer clay in it. If a little bit of the cooking spray mixed in with the polymer clay, it'll help moisten the clay. You don't want to go overboard, and you definitely don't want to dump oil into the clay. But any residue that might have been left over on your scraps, you can just re-massage it back into your clay and you're good to go. If the clay is drying really old, throw it into the microwave for 30-second intervals on the defrost setting or on the half speed setting. And every 30 seconds, take it out, check it, massage it, and keep microwaving it for another 30 seconds until it gets pliable. So let's make something. It's going to take the best impression, and by best I mean this side's a little bit less raised. So go ahead and press that in. I'm going to take my needle tool. Now if you don't have a needle tool, you can use a toothpick, safety pin, come in and cut around. An X-Acto knife would also be great. Alright, I'm just going to soften my edges. I want to bake my jewelry finding in the piece so that I can save myself a step of having to deal with any kind of gluing. I have a very small eye pin. I'm going to stick that into my clay, and I want to make sure that I get the hook positioned right. And if this is going to be on a necklace or something, then you might want the charm to go this way so you can just thread your string through. If this is a little too small and you're going to add a larger jump ring, then twist it this way so that the loop can go in that direction. Of course, you can always, make any type of design that you want to. Let's just do a little round bead here. Roll in some texture. Decent pair of needle nose pliers and a cutter will get you going. This technique is to install the eye hook prior to baking. The other option is to put a hole in whatever you're making. For heavier objects, I'm going to turn this into a screw. Take my needle nose pliers and just bending around, I'm turning this into a little corkscrew. Just want to make sure you bend in the right direction so that your pin is upright and your corkscrew part is running that way. I can take this little pin, screw it into my unbaked polymer, squish and fix up my sides there. And when that fires out, it's going to give me a decent grab. When you're handling fresh polymer, if it's soft, it can be very impressionable. Just handling that, I just wiped off most of my pattern. What you might want to do is put in your hooks and then use a pair of pliers as your holder while you're, manipulating or working or carving on the fresh clay. Now, if you want to be fancy, you can go ahead and buy yourself one of the molds that they sell next to the polymer clay. You just take a bit of the clay, pressing into my mold. Let's take a moment to talk about tools before we dive into attaching things. The smaller versions will definitely make coiling your wires and attaching things a little bit easier since you're working with such small parts. But the other thing you want to note is whether or not there are threading on pliers. Usually if you buy a kit, you're going to get a couple that have these teeth, and then you're going to get some sets that have no teeth. Why does this matter? Well, When you're working with the jewelry findings, the teeth make it a lot easier to grab the bits and twist, but it also can leave markings on your findings, make them look jacked up. The flat ones, they're designed to be a little bit gentler and not have any markings left behind. These flat blunt ones are great if you are trying to straighten out wire pieces or flatten them. The needle nose I tend to rely on the most when I'm twisting and doing my connecting. A couple of the specialty ones that you can pick up are these curved needle nose. It can be helpful if you have a delicate area. And then I have an elongated needle nose. This one I really like using to make jump rings. You'll definitely want a pair of wire cutters, as I mentioned earlier. These, they have some other specialty type. Sometimes they have like extra built-in things. So this one has this wire stripper, which is good for if you have coated wire that you're working with and you're trying to strip that wire. It's mainly for electrical purposes. It also has an inbound cutter. Sometimes your pliers will have them built in. If you did not put your finding into the clay before you baked it, or you're working with another material like wood, you're going to also need either a drill or a Dremel and some tiny bits. And I got this little set under $3 at a little mom and pop hardware store. You could check online. I'm sure Amazon probably has something. So once upon a time, I was going to craft fairs and I got rid of a bunch of the larger stock. I held on to the jewelry. I've always been attracted to jewelry. It was one of my first businesses that I ran long before I went to art school. But anyway, I thought I'd bring these out to show you some of the connections. These here were just some wood pieces that I carved, and because this was when I was going through my steampunk phase, it was very easy to put a screw into the top and use that. For this one, I took one of those straight pins, twisted this around the screw, and then added a jump ring so that I could put it on a chain. This guy, I just had an extra long eye pin, and I ran that eye pin through my tiny little hole that I drilled and twisted it around itself. Added that to some rope. It's basically a clasp. You stick the piece of string or rope or whatever you're using in there and you squish it down. I did similar thing here with this. And then I have some pairs of earrings, and now I used some silver wire to enhance the design of the wood piece. I started my wire here at the back end and just gave it a little loop to hold it in place. It also made it decorative. Did a little twisting on my needle nose pliers, came through the back end, and then used that loop to be the thing that joins the set of the earring. And so these guys are sterling silver plated. The sterling silver is less likely to have allergies versus something like this copper. When you are going to be selling things to people, you want to think about, all right, I'm going to put on the jewelry findings into this pendant piece. I have my eye pin, and I have a really long eye pin. I have a jump ring, and I have my cord. Now this one I ordered on Amazon, and it already comes done. The only downfall to the pre-made ones is you're stuck with whatever length they give you. I have already drilled a tiny hole. I am going to pinch. I'm going to give that a bend. So I have some room. Pop that in there. And then even using my hands, I could do the wrapping, but if you want it to look a little bit cleaner and tighter, go ahead and take your pliers. Your flat ones do the hold of that loop, while you take your second pair and use that to wind around. And I just give it a couple loops around, take my cutters and snip the excess off. You might have a bit of a tail, so go ahead and take your flat pliers squished on in there. This is a little too small to get on my rope, so I have a jump ring waiting. Take one set of pliers, pinch it on one side of the jump ring and the other side, twist in two different directions, and it's very pliable, so I'm pushing down with the one on my right hand and pulling up towards me with my left hand, and it just splits the ring enough for you to go ahead and get that looped through, and then you can pop it onto your rope, then twist back in the opposite direction, and there you have it. You have your rope, and you want to use your rope as your threading, but it doesn't have that eyelet, so you can pick up these little guys, threading your jump ring through, and then it has this open bit we're going to be bending. You can take the end of it and dip it in a little bit of candle wax, or what I like to do is just put a little bit of tape. Give that a trim. stick that on my piece. Use your flat pliers, take one of the prongs, bend it flat down, and then bend up the other side. This is the one that you really do want to be using those non-marring pliers. But that's basically it. You can go ahead and stick your jump ring through that. I did a split thing just for some style. I have a jump ring going through it with these two. If you don't want to do this, you could just run a full cord all the way through and only do it for the end where I have a lobster claw installed. We're back to my sculpey pieces, and I have the ones that I have pre-prepped with holes, and the leaf one I just stuck a needle tool through before I threw it in the oven. I know these shapes are very boring, but this is just so that I can show you how to deal with drilling through. If you have a needle tool, underbake your piece just slightly. You should be able to drive your needle tool through, and you'll want to do this very slowly. Don't stab yourself, or you can use that drill bit. So I have it on go, and it's an easy way is to hold this in your hands from rotating while you're holding the bit, and pull the go very slowly. It'll bring up the prongs. And then you can hold on to that, and it grabs it. All right, then you're in go mode, so you can go ahead and just drill. Now, this is an okay method to use, but the downfall is that the eye pin is not going to stay once you stick it in here without a little bit of glue. So you can go ahead and stick the pin in, and you want to make sure your pin is the right height. For your fish hooks, they're going to have a little split ring here at the center, and what you're going to do is very similar to the way I did that pendant. I'm going to do a twist where I grab on two ends, twist a bit. That opened up my ring there. I can then loop this on through and twist the two bits back. And that's it. Your fish hook is on. As far as my pendants go, I would just put my jump ring through and go ahead and thread that through. Split those two, pop that through, and that's done. Now, if you don't want to make pendants, you could throw a lobster claw on this. A very large lobster claw. Throw that on there on the jump ring at the same time. Don't mind my mixing colors, my bronze jump ring with my copper looking clip. This can become a bag charm or keychain, key ring. Of course, this is my ugly looking ball. Make something better than that. For this, since this is so delicate, I probably would go with just doing a quick jump ring type of deal. I think that's basically it. And there are many different ways of attaching these things. These are just some basic ones that will probably take care of most applications. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already, and I hope to see you soon.